Assalamu alaikum to some of you and peace to the rest of you. On October 28, 2018, Woke Progressive posted a video about black men that don't date black women. And these were men on the Ayanla Van Zant Fix My Life show, or Ayanla Fix My Life show. Woke Progressive played the videos and then would stop and he would refute what these men were saying. But there were certain things that Woke Progressive was saying, and they have to be refuted. I am a man who has only dated and married black women exclusively. And I would prefer to keep it that way. So I agree with Woke Progressive about black women being the best women for black men. But by the same token, Woke Progressive has not understood that his views have been chained to a type of loyalty that no women in the world deserve, and no men are even thought of to deserve this type of loyalty. But then again, like I said, no men are thought to deserve this kind of loyalty. So nobody walks around and promotes this sort of loyalty to men, any men. But he's encouraging black men to be overly loyal to black women, almost no matter what black women do and no matter what flaws they have. Therein lies the mistake. You can listen to it. It is "These Men Don't Date Black Women," and the video maker is Woke Progressive. What has to be refuted first is that he says that black men who don't date black women are weak because black women are strong. Black women do have a strong constitution. This is true, and this is true across nationalities. The problem is that Western black women are not always just strong, but many times they're strong, but they get tired of being strong because they're human. This is not a fault of theirs, but oftentimes because of the trauma, they're loud. And no women in the world except Western black women brag about being loud and difficult to deal with. Women back in the African continent don't brag about this unless they've been exposed to Western feminism, which is a white women's invention. Women in general have been strong and resilient, with the exception of European women. And I can tell you how I know this. Western European women, not Eastern, but Western European women were the driving force behind Western European men going out and taking everything from everybody else. At the end of the day, it was because Western European women were the least controlling of the materialistic and hypergamous instincts. They were the most controlled by it and the least controlling of them. And so they pressured them in. I want X, Y, and Z. I would rather share a rich man with 17 other women than to be with you and actually have your babies with your resources. No, get out there and take it. I don't care what you got to do to get it. These men went out there and they did what they had to do to get it, and they stole it from everybody else. And when Western European men were out colonizing the rest of the world and not only raping other lands, but raping these lands, Western European women did not bat an eyelid. What did they do? They blamed the other women and called them harlots and whores and seductresses and Jezebels in order to take the blame off their men. Because Western European women not only did not want to, no one does, but they refused to get out there and get the resources they wanted from the world themselves. They were not going to go into these mines and pull out the diamonds or the gold. They weren't going to brave the elements in search of any of these precious resources that they demanded before they would love anybody. So that being said, that history lesson aside, he said that he was excusing the attitude problems that, yes, quite enough, maybe even only 60%, maybe only, but that enough Western black women bring to the table. that other women of other ethnicities and cultures know you do not bring to the table if you want to keep your man. And now even Western European women are bringing these attitudes to the table again, and then they lose respect for Western European men who are willing to put up with it. He did not address this. He did not address the fact that black men are very heavily scrutinized, but the ones who are the most irresponsible also learn to be the most manipulative of women, and therefore they are held to lower standards than more responsible men. He did not point this out. There is a reason that driven, ambitious, and responsible black men feel pushed away from black women. It is very simple. They don't have to be ugly to be responsible men. So they want to know why it is that black women have to be ugly or unattractive in order to give them a chance. They're trying to figure this out. Moving on, woke progressive then says that one of the guys who said that he was celibate for the last 3 years must be gay. No, you see, celibate does not mean gay. And as a matter of fact, gay men reputedly, according to certain studies, engage in sex more often than heterosexual men. So that argument doesn't work. Later on, woke progressive makes a reference to how 100,000 years ago when humanity was first getting started. No, 100,000 years ago, we don't know much about human history at the time, but we know that humanity is pretty old. We're aware of that. Now, he could have said 100,000 years ago when civilizations or when permanent settlements began to take shape. Okay, maybe, but then again, that would have been later on in history. So woke progressive is not actually getting the numbers correct when he makes his argument. Woke progressive said, you don't wait for women to come to you. You go to the women. Hold up. If you're a responsible black man, why should you have to work so hard for all of these things in life that women want? And then have to hear women all your young life talk about going out and getting what they want, especially black women, because you know black women are strong, which is true. And black women do tend to go after the things that they want in life, only to have them say that when it comes to men, they don't go after it. Wait, hold up. That's like saying you're not valuable. That's like saying that after you do all the hard work to get everything that women want you to have, you still carry a negative value to where it's wrong if she shows interest in you. No, it's not wrong. You may be interested in it, you may not. But it's not wrong for a woman to show interest in a man. So the thing is that what woke progressive is promoting is a mindset that spoils black women at the expense of black men who already have never really been enemies to black women in the first place as a whole. He is promoting, when he is suggesting for black men to do, is get out there and get all that you can get that women want you to have. Play the game. Do what you can to satisfy them. Then take all of these things to approach them, reinforcing the idea that you have a negative value anyway, so that they feel completely comfortable leaving you and taking half your stuff if they can do it later, just because they like someone else more, even though the men are outnumbered by the women. This is what woke progressive is suggesting. Woke progressive points to one man, and he says to one man, don't complain about black women judging you by what you wear from the music you listen to. I'm judging you by what you wear. Your overalls, you look like a ghetto farmer. Wait a minute, okay, are we allowed to judge women, black women, by what they wear? Isn't that an unpopular idea right now? Making assessments about black women based on what they wear in public. Okay, if that's wrong, then why is it okay for them to judge men based on what we wear? Either both are okay or neither one is okay. He's not suggesting that black men have standards comparable to the standards to which black women are holding black men. There is a dysfunction, and the dysfunction is primarily in women's mate selection in our community. The white community is going through the same thing. I just don't care about them. Great. I don't care if their family units break up. It's good for us. But for us, we're going through a dysfunctional mate selection phase right now in our community. And it's not on the part of men. There are men who select strippers, and there are men who select good women. But on the part of women, I'm not saying this because I'm sexist. I'm saying it because it's true. You can witness it on the part of women. Our women, just like white women, are being socialized to be more attracted to the worst men. And good women in the black community, women that are otherwise good, responsible, educated, driven, ambitious, are also being socialized to select the worst men, or to find attractive the worst men in the community, and to compete with every other type of woman for these same most irresponsible men in our community. Young guys, generally. They get socialized to this in their teens. They grow into it. They don't grow out of it until they have had some other man's children. The worst men's children, usually. Until their age begins to show. Oftentimes, which is more of a problem to them than it is to the men when you're black. But it still bothers them when the age begins to show, so they have to perceive a loss of options in men before they change the men they're looking for. My brother told me this last summer, black, don't overthink this too much. When women get older, they just want a good man. But I had to explain to him, even though this is true, what do they have to go through first? And what effect does it have to have on them and their options in men before they decide they just want a good man? That's the problem. If they look great when they're young, and they look great when they get older, but it is only when their looks fade, or if they think their looks are fading, that they decide, I just want a good man. That means they didn't actually grow up. That means they did not actually mature. It is just like in religious circles. Religious people talk about some folks who have to go through hard times to appreciate what they got. If you can only appreciate things when you lose them, then this means that there is a maturity that you did not reach. Now, people may have to go through that phase when they're young. Kids oftentimes do. But if you are an adult and the only way you can appreciate something is when you lose it and you can't get it back, then there's a level of maturity you failed to reach and you're growing. It's the same thing with women. Men aren't always better than women, and they're not always worse either. Goes back and forth. But in this regard, women have forced men from a young age to be much better. They wouldn't tolerate it. But men will tolerate it, and woke progressive is not addressing the standards discrepancy between the genders. It is not men who have too high of a standard for black women to reach. It is black women that generally entertain too high standards for black men to reach. Mutually exclusive standards. Black women are not the only ones to have them. Western women in general do. I'm just glad when their communities go through this dysfunction, because I want their communities to shrink in numbers. I want their family units to dissolve and break apart. Good for them. But I want ours to get stronger. And there's no better time for our family situation to get stronger and more stable than the same time when theirs is weakening, and we're not doing that. I make no apologies for anything I'm saying. There's a standards discrepancy. Men's standards are too goddamn low. In the Western world in general, they're too low. Black or white. Women's standards are too high. It's easy for me to say this because I'm a man. But hey, look, I actually sat and looked and saw it. There are exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, normally attractive men, by women's standards, don't go asking for a hell of a lot, because they're taught at a young age to understand that women are only human when it comes to them meeting standards. But when it comes to women having standards, then they're women. That's a problem. When we decide what standards they must meet, we have to keep in mind that they're only human. When they decide what standards they're going to have, then they get to remind us that they're women. Lois Lane, if you will notice, in fiction, which does affect culture, popular culture, Lois Lane is not only a human being, she's a subnormal but a beneath average human being. She is so stupid that she consistently gets herself into terrible situations by snooping around. And she gets discovered, and she gets tied up, and she's on the verge of death, and Superman, with his super hearing, has to swoop down and save her, and she loves him, never realizing that he's actually Clark Kent. The human being, Clark Kent, she does not love. She's so unimpressed with him. But the alien from outer space who flies around, she's impressed with him simply because he's got beyond human abilities, even though he's not human. She knows he's from another planet, and she can't stop thinking about him. This reinforces the notion that you men, you got to be superhuman, but women get to be beneath average. And it is perfectly okay for them to be into you. And if you were really men, you would accept this. Woke progressive has not realized that the black community has been subjected to the same brainwashing, and it's not working. It is this same brainwashing that caused instability in Western white families. But we bought into it. He's not addressing this. No. Black men, if you have to have so much, and you have to be so tall, and you have to be so stylish, and you have to be also so educated, but you also have to be so street smart for a normally attractive woman to like you. An 8 or a 7.5 on a scale to 10 for beauty. You got to have all these things. Then you have to stop and think, for every standard, what standard do you have for her to meet? If she has 13 standards, you have to have 13 standards. If they're not the same, fine, but they need to be the same, at least in intensity and quantity, even if they're not the exact same measurements. Okay? You have to be tall. Fair enough. You have to be taller than her. You have to make more money than her. You got to be older than her. Okay? So now this means that she has to be younger than you, poorer than you. You have to be stronger than her. That means she has to be weaker than you. You have to be smarter than her. That means she has to be dumber than you. So if that's the case, what is she bringing? She has literally reduced herself to body parts that she's bringing to the table. If you're going to accept nothing but the body parts, then you're accepting a fool's deal. You got to say, okay, I got to bring all this to the table. I got to be all of this. What does she have to be? Okay, she needs to bring an education. She needs to bring a job. If you still have to have more than her, okay, then she's got to bring a job. She has to bring some sort of skill that makes my life and my house easier to live in. And she better not be giving me excuses when I say I need a quickie or a marathon. None of this headache stuff. No. I had to bring all of this to the table, and it had to be more than what you brought to the table. You better bring this in. And even then, sex is an equal trade if you're doing it right. So even then, she better bring something. She got to bring something you're not bringing. If you got to bring something she's not bringing, it's your call, but you got to pick some standards. And I do want to see black men and women together. Believe that. But she's got to bring something to the table to replace what she's asking you to bring to the table. For everything you have to bring that exceeds something she brings, she has to bring something exceeding something you bring. It's only fair, especially in the age of women's empowerment and women's liberation. Woke progressive is not addressing this. The men that say they will not date black women are the ones that are actually addressing the issues. Woke progressive is right to recommend that black men and black women get together, but he is wrong for refusing to actually accept the validity of the issues those men are bringing to the table and addressing. We do not have to tolerate a loud attitude from anybody. No men are expected to do this except for Western men that are white and Western men that are black. All other groups, not expected to. And if they've been here for very long, multiple generations, eventually they get expected to tolerate the same stuff. And in all honesty, a lot of them tend to go ahead and just marry out. That's the truth of the matter. You see, you take Southern Asian women that are second or third generation in the United States. And they will talk women's lib and empowerment, and then they still have the nerve to sit back and say, I don't approach men. I don't even show men when I'm interested, no matter how much I like them. These men, second and third generation, Southern Asian men in the US and in the UK, you know what they do? They go back to Southern Asia and they marry somebody there. And they say, if I have to bring all of this to the table, then she's going to submit. That is what will compensate for everything else in which I had to supersede her. I had to supersede her in height, muscle mass, education, resources, age. Then if I got to supersede her in all of this, she has to bring looks, tits, ass, and submission to what the hell I tell her. She is not going to sit up here and tell me, don't sexually objectify me, and you got to exceed me in all of these categories, and I'm not going to submit to you because I'm my own independent woman and I have my own mind, even though you got to bring more money to the table. These men are saying absolutely not. So oftentimes a young guy will go back to the home country to get married. His sister, born in the West, does not go back to the home country to find one of those men. Doesn't do it. Because she knows those men are not going to tolerate her assertiveness and her independence unless she's the one taking the responsibility on her shoulders that men would be required to take, maybe not even then. It's important to understand. Only Western men, white and black, are expected to tolerate this stuff. Nobody else. Two mutually exclusive standards that women set, and we're sitting here jumping from foot to foot trying to meet them. Woke progressive did not point this out. I wish he had, but he left it off. Even though I agree that black men and black women should get together, in order for this to happen, we got to realize that these issues got to be brought out. There are things that men got to fix, but usually these are things of intelligence. They're more strategic. They're not necessarily things that black women would want us to fix, but we need to fix them. There are things black women got to fix. We do have to get these things out on the table and hammer them out. And I'm glad that black folks are doing it. But we cannot afford people to getting up and saying, okay, no, black men, you cater to what black women want. Just cater. But don't ask for the same in return. Ninja, is you crazy? Isn't that exactly the same kind of relationship we're refusing to have with the white Western world? I hope this message has been a benefit. Assalamu alaikum.